Delaware Congressman John Carney blasts Senator Elizabeth Warren. And is he running for governor? Maybe. This is the Delaware Way. I'm Larry Menti. Welcome to the Delaware Way, and we are happy and proud to welcome to the program U.S. Representative John Carney, representing Delaware, of course.
The whole state of Delaware.
The whole state, yeah. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to start off with, because I know you're from Wilmington, and the article that was in NewsWeek. The week that we're taping the show, they had an article calling Wilmington Murdertown USA. Your reaction?
Yeah, it's very disturbing, obviously. We don't think of our town that way. I've lived in the city here of Wilmington for now almost 30 years, and it's a great place to live. I've raised my two boys here. We live in a neighborhood that we feel is safe, but we also have this terrible problem of drugs and violence. And it's not dissimilar to the problems that small cities and big cities across the East Coast and across the country have. It's not something that we're going to solve overnight. We need to make sure that our kids are graduating from high school, going on and getting skills so they can be gainfully employed and don't turn to the streets and drug dealing and that kind of violence. It also requires in the short term a real law enforcement approach that we can, at the federal level, help the local folks in their efforts.
Did you think the article was unfair?
I think it was sensationalist a bit, yes. Is it unfair about the violence that happens in our city? Absolutely no. Is it unfair in characterizing the whole city as unsafe and violent? Absolutely. As I said, I live here and have for 30 years. A lot of us, when we saw the article, were texting and email one another saying, hey, this is not our city. We need to stand up for Wilmington, and certainly I know our congressional delegation works hard to make this is our commercial hub.
Is there a federal responsibility in
There is.
battling?
In terms of law enforcement, we have a lot of drug dealing and gun running that goes across state borders. Obviously, Delaware is a very small state. We have gun task forces and drug task forces at the federal level with the FBI and other federal resources where we can help the local state and Wilmington police departments do their job. And
I know there's already been some success and some big drug busts. Here is
just within the last week or two.
Absolutely.
Huge drug busts. So I've been working at the grassroots level with kids, coaching kids. As I said, my two sons grew up in the city and played basketball and other sports here in the city. And we've got to start at that level too. You got to start and get the kids before they turn to the streets at younger and younger ages now, actually.
And now I want to leave Wilmington and go halfway around the world, which is
what we do in the job that I'm in. Right?
I understand. That's why I'm asking you. And we were all shaken this morning by the news of the attack on a school. We're taping this show when this happened. On the attack of a school in Pakistan by the Taliban, where the numbers keep rising, but over 120 small children were killed.
Terrible.
And it kind of shows who they are. Does it change your opinion of what should be done in that area of the world?
It's a horrific attack, a terrorist attack. But what it says to us is that we have to be ever vigilant, that these threats are out there, they're real, they haven't gone away, and we need to do, at the federal level, everything that we possibly can to root out these terror networks. I think in many areas we're doing better. Obviously, we have the rise of ISIS in Syria and Iraq, which is a troublesome development. It's kind of an offshoot of the original al-Qaeda organization. We have the Taliban there in Pakistan and Afghanistan that need to be fought.
So does that mean we have to get to stay longer or get out quicker in Afghanistan?
Well, I think in Afghanistan, the approach, the anti-terrorism approach, where we're in there not so much to build a new government, although that's an important part of it. And this is where a lot of the debate was several years back with larger forces, but in there in an intelligence gathering way, really going after counterterrorism efforts, going after these terror networks to stop the kinds of things that we saw this morning.
So not a massive amount of troops, but just
no, I don't think that's going to do it.
Special forces.
Yeah, and we do. One of the. I think I traveled to Afghanistan in 2011 with a budget congressional delegation, and one of the things that we learned is part of the capacity that we were developing on the ground in Afghanistan was a local network of police officers. And we had contacts within those local networks that would lead us to these kinds of things. It was the hope
I want to get to the spending bill that was passed right before the legislative session ended, that you had a big part to do with because you were in the Financial Services Committee. I want to get to the good part about Delaware and the jobs that were saved, but also the bill has been attacked now as it got into the Senate, especially by Elizabeth Warren and some other progressive Democrats, as being, as pulling back Dodd-Frank, at being, some called it reckless. There were those that that said part of it, the New York Times reported that part of it was written by Citibank. What do you make of those attacks after the bill passed so easily in the House?
Yeah, what's discouraging is it's just not a true narrative, right? There was a very narrow provision that allowed some of the derivatives to come back into the banks that were pushed out. The title of the original provision in Dodd-Frank was called the push-out provision, which, by the way, was not in the bill when it came out of the House, and was added as a political move by Blanche Lincoln at the last minute to try to save her re-election campaign in Arkansas for the Senate, that somehow she was taking this hard line against Wall Street bankers. The question really is, and it's a legitimate question where you can come down on one side or the other, or is whether you think that trading ought to exist in the banks that are very rigorously regulated by the Fed and other regulators, or pushed out into these non-bank affiliates that aren't subject to that oversight. That's a tough call. None of the other aspects of Dodd-Frank were affected at all. There are no bailouts by law, according to Dodd-Frank. If a bank gets in trouble in terms of insolvency, what's called orderly liquidation authority kicks in, which means the bank is liquidated in an orderly fashion so that it doesn't affect as dramatically investors and innocent parties. That all that framework exists. So the scare tactics.
So the narrative that it was going to take us back to 2008.
It was a political narrative to try to score points, and it did a.
By whom?
By the folks that
Elizabeth Warren specifically?
In particular, sure.
And she was trying to score political points for a possible run?
For a possible run. You know, she's been rumored to think about running for president. She said she's not. Of course, Hillary Clinton is deciding what to do. The vice president, of course, our own Joe Biden has talked about running as well. Here in Delaware, we're all for Joe. So I think it was an effort. It was discouraging to me to see the misrepresentation of the facts, frankly.
Was the New York Times wrong that Citibank?
I don't remember seeing the article, but what I do remember, that reference is not to this bill, but to the original bill that passed in the House with over 300 votes, that somehow they had a hand in the drafting of that.
Well, let's get off that and get to the good part of the bill for Delaware.
Huge win for Delaware in the bill.
And tell me how.
Well, we've been fighting for 3.5 years to protect 500 jobs at a company, Cigna, that writes health insurance plans into an international market. So mostly U.S. citizens working for a time overseas, in Europe, South America, China, wherever the case may be. So these plans have to have networks in foreign healthcare markets. They have to have the ability to reimburse in foreign currencies. They have to have like coverage for evacuation and all kinds of particular, very high-end coverage. Well, their competitors in foreign countries are not subject to the particulars of the Affordable Care Act. This was an oversight, and I was not in the Congress at the time, but it was an oversight in the drafting of the Affordable Care Act that these plans came under that rubric.
And the offshoot of that is that Delaware could lose jobs.
That these jobs would have moved to Brussels or Paris or wherever so they could compete on a level playing field with their international.
How many jobs are we talking about? 500
in Delaware, 700 in California, and hundreds across the country.
So jobs that would have left that don't
would have gone right offshore. So it took us a long time, a lot of effort. Senator Carper, Senator Coons, myself, the governor, Governor Markell, working with our colleagues in the House and the Senate, because we had to navigate those very testy waters that implicated the Affordable Care Act, where half of the Congress wants to repeal it, the other half doesn't want to change it at all. Immigration law and tax law, you can imagine the difficulties
No, it's amazing.
It's
amazing it got passed. So also nice job with the jobs. When we come back, and we're going to take a break right now. When we come back, I do want to continue a conversation about jobs overseas and inversion when it relates to Delaware. When we come back with Congressman John Carney of Delaware.